Right, good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to all of you who are watching this live. It's good to have so many of you with us this afternoon. And if you're watching this later on the replay, then hello to you as well. So for those who are new here, who don't know who I am, I'm David Miles, and I'm on a mission to help mortgage brokers and financial advisors like you to generate a consistent flow of leads so as you can stop stressing about where your next client is coming from. Now, over the last few months, in the course of these live streams, we've talked about a number of ways of driving traffic to your website, things like Google ads, Facebook ads, putting yourself out there on LinkedIn, all those different things. But the thing we haven't really talked about is once you're doing all that, how are you going to know what marketing is working and what isn't? And there are two things I want you to keep in mind, or two problems which are widely quoted in the field of marketing. The first is that you can't improve what you can't measure. And the second is a quote from many, many years ago from a guy who was Postmaster General in the US in the 1800s. And he said, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half. And the point of Google Analytics is that it addresses both of these problems. So if you're using Google Analytics, it allows you to find out lots of information about the traffic that comes to your website, everything from how many people visit your website through to how people's behavior on your site varies depending upon things like what kind of device they're using, how they found your website, etc., etc. So to give a simple example, by using Google Analytics, you'd be able to find out how many inquiries or how many leads you got each week as a result of the activity you were doing on Facebook, or as a result of your Google advertising campaigns. And without using Google Analytics and without having that information, you won't know which marketing channels are delivering you results, and you won't know which half of your advertising money is being wasted and which half is generating you results. So that's the reason why Google Analytics is so important, and why it's one of the things that with the people that I work with one-to-one, the first thing I do with them is make sure that their Google Analytics is set up properly. So as everything we do from there on, we've actually got real data to measure the results against and decide how we're going to, what things need improving and how we're going to improve them. So the big problem, I guess, really then with analytics is that a lot of people don't know how to use it, or if they've got it installed on the website, they haven't configured it properly. So just out of interest, it'd be good, those of you who are watching live, just pop something in the comments just to let me know whether you've got analytics installed. But also, this is where a degree of honesty is required. If you do have analytics installed, do you actually ever look at it? That would be quite interesting to know. And I just saw a question pop up there from Paul, who said, what about Microsoft ads? Yep, Google Analytics will track the performance of traffic you get from all traffic sources. So as well as Google ads, it will track how people act on your site if they've come there from Microsoft ads, or LinkedIn ads, or Twitter ads, or anything basically that sends traffic to the website. So what I'm going to do in today's session is I'm going to cover 4 of the most important and or the simplest things which you can look at in analytics, which are going to help you see where your website is or isn't performing well, so as you can take action to improve things accordingly. As we go through, do put any questions you've got in the comments. If you're watching this on the replay, you can put questions in the comments as well, because I will be keeping an eye on this post for the next few days. And if I see any new comments or questions coming up, then I will jump in and answer those. Final thing to say by way of introduction is do stick around to the end, because once I've been through these 4 points about analytics that I want to share with you, I've got a special offer or freebie that I'm going to tell you about at the end. So let's now do a screen share and bring an analytics dashboard up for you to see. Bear with me a second. Right, okay, so hopefully now you can all see a Google Analytics dashboard on the screen. Now this is actually, I don't know if you know, but Google actually provide a sort of dummy test Google Analytics account that people can use to learn analytics themselves, or to have because a lot of the time, if people are working in a big company, they might not have access to that company's analytics. Or if you're a small business, even though you might be the business owner and you've got access to analytics, if it's not been running very long, or you've got a website that doesn't get much traffic, you might not have much data there to play with. So Google provides this demo account, so you can go in and see an account that's got lots of data and all the features and everything. So I'll put a link in the comments to an article that describes how you can get access to that if it's not something that you've seen before. So when you go into analytics, you'll be presented with a kind of dashboard view like this normally, and then over on the left here you've got sections with different types of reports, and each one of these expands. Like if I click next to audience here, you'll see it expands into a whole load of different reports which fall under the audience category. You've also got, as well as the main sections, audience acquisition, behavior and conversions, you've got this real-time section here. This actually shows you data about the people who are on your website right at the very moment. And so it will show you everything from the total number of people on the site through to things like which pages they're looking at, whereabouts in the world or whereabouts in the country they come from. To be honest, that's probably not a particularly useful section for most of you who are watching today. That's useful if you've got a really big website that's got lots and lots of traffic on it. But if you've got the typical kind of small business website, but there's only ever 3 or 4 people visiting at the same time, typically, then you're not going to get a lot of useful information from the real-time section. So you're far better off focusing on these 4 sections here, audience through to conversions, where you're seeing historical data. So that could be data about what happened earlier today, or over the last week, or over the last month, or the last year, or whatever, but you're seeing historical data, so you've got a decent amount of data and a decent volume of data to analyze in one go. So the first place that most people are going to head to then in analytics is to go into the audience section and go to overview. And so this is the first of the 4 sections that I want to tell you about. And some of the things we look at in here are actually common to all of the reports. So for example, you can select a date range that you want to look at. So there's various presets here. I'm going to pick last 30 days and then apply. So things like the date range, you can do that in every report in analytics. Yeah. So once I've selected the last 30 days, I see a graph of the number of users who've visited the site each day. And then and I can change what's shown on the graph there by using the drop downs there, or I can add a second thing on there. So I could I could put number of sessions on there as well, for example. So you can play around with the graph. You can look at it on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis, whatever. But what I wanted to focus on was these numbers down here, because these are some quite important metrics down here, but not everyone knows what they all mean. So let's run through them then. The first one, users. So this is the number of actual people who have visited your website during whatever date range it is we're looking at up here. So in this case, just over 46,000 people have visited this website in the last 30 days. Of those, 41,000 or nearly 42,000 were new users. In other words, people who were visiting the site for the first time. And then we've got here the number of sessions. So in simple terms, think of a session as being a visit. Okay, so what it's saying is we had 60,000 visits to the site. So basically users is the number of people, sessions is the total number of visits that those people made. So we can see straight away there, and I can pretty much guarantee if you look at your own site, the numbers will be different, but the number of sessions will always be higher than the number of users, because what we're seeing here clearly is that some of these users visited the site more than once, and that's why there's more than 46,000 sessions. And that's borne out by this next figure here, which tells us that on average, each user visited the site 1.3 times. Okay, so that's simply that number divided by that number. The page views number, I don't think that's a very useful number myself, because it tends to, even on a small website, it tends to be quite a big number, the page views number. And that's because what page views is the total number of individual pages that were viewed by all of these users across all of these sessions. So it's not a particularly helpful number most of the time. But what it does do is it allows us to calculate, or it allows analytics to calculate this number here which is the average number of pages looked at per visit. So what we're seeing here is that the typical visit to this website, the typical session, involved just over 5 pages on average being viewed. We can see the average session duration, or the average length of each visit. That's a reasonably healthy 3.5 minutes there. And then this last one here is one that I've come across a lot of people over the years who get quite hung up about the bounce rate, and they end up looking at bounce rate just in isolation without taking anything else into account. And whilst the bounce rate is an important number, just like any of these other numbers in analytics, if you look at it just on its own, you can get a bit of a distorted picture. So what is the bounce rate? Well, the bounce rate is a measure of how many people bounce. And what we mean by a bounce is when someone comes to your site and leaves again, having only looked at one page. So a typical kind of bounce, and this is the reason why people get really worked up about the bounce rate, a typical kind of bounce is someone comes along to your website, they take one look at, I take one quick look at it, decide it's not for them, and they leave again. And yes, that is a bounce. But it's also a bounce if somebody comes to your website, looks at your homepage, reads all the information that's there, thinks, I like the sound of these people, I want them to give me some financial advice or sort out a mortgage for me, and they pick up the phone and they ring you, having looked at the number that's in the top right-hand corner of your page, and then they close the website. Now, that's also a bounce, but it's not a bad bounce because the person got all the information they needed from that single page. And in fact, they then phoned you up and potentially got a mortgage or took out a pension or whatever. So don't always think that a bounce is a bad thing. It depends a bit on the nature of your site and whether it is possible for someone to convert having only visited one page. So I would say at the very least, rather than, I said, don't look at bounce rate in isolation, at the very least, look at it in conjunction with session duration and see what the average session duration is and what the bounce rate is. Yes, Paul says, is that the page that they land on? So it's a bounce, whatever page they come in on, whatever page they land on when they enter the site, which may be a home page or maybe another page. If that page is the only page they look at during that visit, then they are said to have bounced. Okay, so bounces do not always happen just from the home page. It's whatever page the person entered via. I hope that answers the question. Right, so they're the main things to look at on the audience overview section. You've also got a pie chart there showing the split between new visitors and returning visitors. And you've got some things down here. You can look at what countries they come from, what cities, etc. And all these things here, all these things down here have more detail over in there. There's a question there. I'm seeing these questions flash up and then they disappear. So if you time it right, and my eyes happen to be glancing at the iPad I've got down here, then I will see your question. If not, I might not see it until I scroll through afterwards. So someone, I think it was Mark, just said that his Google Analytics doesn't have an audience tab. I have to confess I've not come across that before, so that might be something that I need to look at and come back to you on, Mark. But yeah, if maybe put something, I'll pick it up in the comments afterwards, and if it's a question that makes more sense when I read it properly, I'll answer it there. If not, I'll come back to you separately. So that's the audience bit. Now the other thing, actually, just to show you here, you can do comparisons, because with a lot of the data and analytics, it's all very well saying, well, we got a bounce rate of 41%, for example. Well, is that good or bad? And one of the ways of seeing if one of these numbers is good or bad is to look at trends and see whether what we're getting this month is better or worse than what we got last month. So an easy way to do that, and again, you can do this on any of the reports within analytics, is to go back to your date selector here and click the compare to button. And you can compare it to the previous period. So in this case, it would be the previous 30 days, but it's now highlighted there in orange. Or you could do the previous year, which would be the same period in 2019, or you could select a custom one. So let's leave it on previous 30 days and apply. And what will happen now is it will put a second line on the graph, an orange line showing the data for that earlier 30-day period, the August 21st to September 19th. And now down here, it will show us the comparison figures for each of these metrics. So we can see that our number of sessions, we know it was 60,000 odd in the main period we're looking at here, the last 30 days. So we can see that in the previous 30 days, it was 49,751. So it's gone up by 20%. Our number of users has gone up as well. and the bounce rate has actually improved slightly from 43% to 41%. So obviously, if some of these have got worse, they'd be in red, but on Google's demo data, it's all green because their site is getting better every month. Whether that's real or not, or whether that's they fix that, so they're getting better and better, who knows? But anyway, their metrics for those 230 days are getting better. And then we can just tick there to turn that comparison back off again. Okay, so that's the first one, the audience one. Now, the next one I want to talk about is, I want to skip right down to the final section here, conversions. And the reason I'm going straight to this is for two reasons. I want to show you what is in here, but also highlight the fact that for a lot of you, if you haven't got analytics set up correctly, you may have nothing appearing in this section at all, which is a bad thing. So what this shows, if it's set up correctly, is how many, if we go into goals overview, it shows us how many goals your website achieved. Now, what do you mean by a goal or a conversion is when someone does something on your website which is significant. You know, it's what your end goal is. So in the case of, for example, a lead generation type website that a typical mortgage broker or financial advisor is going to have, your main conversion is going to be somebody filling in an inquiry form, asking you to call them back or send them a quote or whatever it might be. But there could also be other kinds of conversions, like maybe somebody downloading a PDF that you've got on your website, or watching a particularly important video, you know, or whatever it might be. And obviously, if you were in a different kind of business, your main goal type might be someone making an online purchase. Okay, so to give you an example, on my own website, the kind of goals I have, I've got goals for people downloading a PDF. I've got goals for people filling in an inquiry form saying they want me to talk to me. I've got a goal if they book an online appointment through my online scheduling system, and I've got a goal if they purchase a book or a course or something like that. And on this demo site, if we select the list of all goals here, you can see they've got 4 different goals here, the main ones being a completed purchase and a registration. Okay, so registration will be filling in some kind of form. So the graph shows us the number of goal completions per day, and you can either look at that for all the goals, or you could pick, if I just pick the registrations goal, for example, then we can see the data just for that particular goal. And if we click into source medium down here, we can see, you know, of that total 267 goal completions or registrations that we got, this is the breakdown of how, you know, where they came from, how people got to the site prior to doing that conversion. So basically, of the 267 registrations that this site had, 107 came from people who found the website through organic Google search results. Okay, I'll talk about what some of these others mean in a moment when we get onto that section. Now, the reason I particularly highlight this is obviously this is the real kind of measure thing. You know, this is, I talked in the introduction about the fact that you're looking to try and see, you know, what bits of your marketing work and what don't. Well, ultimately, whether something works or not is defined as, does it achieve your desired goal? Does it generate conversions? So if you haven't got this set up properly, you're not going to have that information. And the reason that it requires setting up is, of course, although Google Analytics is very clever, it's not clever enough to know what counts as a goal for your particular business, for your particular website. So for this section to work, you have to have gone into the admin section and configured the goals in the first place and told analytics things like, well, you know, for me, a goal is if someone fills in this form, or if they download this guide, or if they purchase, you know, this product or whatever. So unless you've done that, then it won't give this data. And you know, a lot of the time, people, even, you know, web developers, they will set up Google Analytics insofar as they'll put the analytics code on your website for you, but they won't think to actually ask you what conversions you want to track. So if you click into the goals section on yours and you get a message comes up here that's saying basically you haven't configured any goals, then you need to go and give your web developer a slap on the wrist. Or if you set up your own website, set up your own analytics, give yourself a slap on the wrist and get those configured. It's not something I can go into now how you configure them, and it varies from one person to another, but there are lots of help articles online, and actually it's something I'm going to make sure is covered in detail in the new membership program I'm launching, which a number of you know about. In fact, actually, commercial break, for those who don't know, I am in the process at the moment of launching a membership program which is going to be designed for mortgage brokers and financial advisors who want to create the kind of online systems that will give them a consistent flow of leads, so you don't have to keep worrying about where your next client's coming from, and you know you've got a solid pipeline. And that's going to be based around, rather than the kind of thing where you're left to just do studying online yourself and follow through online courses, at the core of this program is going to be group coaching calls. So twice a month, we'll have a group Zoom call where, you know, I'll present a particular topic, but the big difference is, rather than this where, you know, it's a one-way kind of thing, it will be group discussion and you can ask questions. It'll be like being in a training room basically, but on Zoom, and we'll have a different topic for each session. In between times, there will be online courses and resources and things you can go and look at to help you implement the stuff we talk about in the coaching. There'll be an online forum, we can ask questions, you can get access to one-to-one training from me at discounted rates as part of it. So if you're not already on the waiting list for that, it launches on the 3rd of November. If you want to be kept up to date with developments on that and get access to it at the start for reduced monthly pricing and everything, go to the ppcmachine.co.uk/waiting-list, and you can just put yourself on the waiting list there. There's no obligation. You can join the waiting list and then decide you don't want to do it, but at least if you're on there, you'll get to know all about it. Okay, end of commercial break. Right, so that was the second one, the goal tracking. So on to the third one I wanted to show you now, which is back in the audience section. This is a fairly quick one, but it's an important one because it may be something which is, you know, quite easy for you to fix if it shows up a problem. So under audience, there's a mobile section. And if we go into overview on this, it will show us the data for this website, or for your website if it's your analytics, broken down by device type, i.e. desktop computers, mobiles, or tablets. So this is a form of what we call segmenting. So we know that from our original audience overview that we had 46,000 people visit the site in total. And this shows us the segmentation, the breakdown of that 46,000, you know, what devices were we used. So out of that 46,000, 11,769 of them were using a mobile phone. And the beauty of this, and you can do similar things, you know, based on geographical things, what countries people come from, or what web browsers they're using, or whatever. But the beauty of this is it allows you to see where the problems are, or where the successes are. So we know, for example, that our bounce rate was 41%. We can see here how it varies according to the device type. So we can see straight away that we have a significantly higher bounce rate if someone's using a mobile compared to a desktop. Now, this is one of the simple things I think you should all look at on your own analytics, because very often, if you've got a much higher bounce rate on mobile than you have on desktop, what does that suggest? Well, it suggests that potentially your site is not very mobile friendly. When someone sees it on a mobile device, it's cramped and crowded or difficult to use, and so they give up and they leave without going further into the site. You know, and that might be coupled with a really short visit duration as well, compared to the average visit duration or the visit duration that you get on desktop. Now, actually, the data we've got in this demo account is quite interesting, because on this one, although we've got a higher bounce rate on mobile, and although we've got a shorter visit duration, if you look over here at the percentage of people who are completing a registration, or if we change the goal to purchase completed, you can see that in both cases, the conversion rate for mobile is actually higher. So although people are more likely to bounce, those who do stay on the site are actually more likely to convert. So, you know, if you had, and this is an example of where, you know, analytics will show you the data and show you the information, but then it's up to you to interpret that and try and work out, well, what does that actually mean? And what do I do about it? You know, what do I do as a result of that, of what I've seen in that data? And potentially here, you know, the answer would be, well, let's say, for example, the people running this website were running a Google Ads campaign or a Facebook Ads campaign. If they're seeing that on mobile they get a significantly higher conversion rate, then that could be an indication that they need to adjust their budgets within Google Ads or Facebook Ads or Microsoft Ads or whatever. So if they're spending a greater proportion of their ad budget on mobile users rather than on desktop users. Okay, so obviously the kind of intelligence you can gain from analytics will vary from one person to another, but that hopefully gives you an idea of the kind of things that you can start to look at if you understand in the first place what these numbers are actually telling you. Right, so then the final one I want to look at is to go into the acquisition section. So acquisition is all about where do your visitors come from? How are you acquiring these visitors to your site in the first place? Are they coming from social media? Are they coming from Google? Are they coming from Bing? Are they coming from, just having heard about your website and typing the address in? So in acquisition, the best places to start off are to go under all traffic, and you can look at the channels report first of all. So this gives you a reasonably high level view of, again, all the same top line numbers as we've already seen, but now instead of being broken down by device type as they were just now in the devices report, now they're broken down by the acquisition channel. So we can see that the greatest number of visits came from direct traffic. So direct traffic is basically people who already know the address of your website and they go and type it direct into their browser, or they've been to your site before and therefore they bookmarked it and they just go to the bookmark. So this site clearly has some good brand awareness. Maybe they're doing lots of TV advertising or newspaper advertising or whatever, and people are just seeing their name out there and typing it straight in. Their second biggest source of traffic is organic search, and so on down here. Referral is when someone's seen a link to your site on another site. So, maybe there was a write-up about your business in the local newspaper. They put that article on their local newspaper website and there was a link through to your site. If someone clicks that, that's a referral visit from, from the local Birmingham Recorder or whatever your local newspaper is. Social media, paid searches, things like Google Ads, Microsoft Ads, etc. If you go to the source medium report, you can drill in and get a bit more detail on that. So now it actually breaks it down, and it's showing the first 10 rows here, but with all these reports, it will show you the total number of rows available, and you can choose to look at more than just the first 10 by using that little selector there. So now we can see, we saw on the first one that we'd got a certain amount of traffic from organic. Now we can see this broken down into organic traffic from Google at number 2 here. But then, for example, down at number 11, the organic traffic from Bing. We can see our CPC traffic, CPC being cost per click. So this is Google cost per click traffic. So this is Google Ads traffic. But we might also somewhere on the list have some Bing CPC. We've got referral traffic there from YouTube, for example. Referral traffic there from what I assume is Colorado University, because it's a .edu address. Stuff from Yahoo. So all sorts of different, obviously the numbers get quite small as you go down the list. But you can see your main traffic sources up there. And again, you can see the conversion rates as long as you set up goal tracking. You can see the conversion rates for each one. So that might tell you that have we got anything particularly interesting here. So you can see here, for example, on the Google CPC, not many visits, only 108 visits from Google Ads, but it's got quite a, compared to some of the other sources, it's got quite a good conversion rate. So maybe they need to try pumping a bit more money into their Google Ads campaign if it's performing well, because if you compare that to the organic, a lot more traffic from organic, but the conversion rate is lower. So again, this is where you can start to get a bit of a handle on whether the time or money you're spending on particular marketing channels, whether that's paying off. Maybe you're spending 5 hours a day doing stuff on LinkedIn, but never getting anyone visit your website from LinkedIn. Then you might want to question whether that time is well spent, and or whether you need to revise your LinkedIn strategy so as you're getting more more useful stuff from it. So that's the kind of thing you can see from here. So they're really I think the 4 main things which can give you potentially some quick wins, and which are where you can potentially start to sort of easily understand what the data means, and also they're things which I think will, it's probably safe to say, will be applicable to everyone watching this session. Whereas obviously some of the things like e-commerce reports about which products sell the most, well, that's probably not relevant to to most of you who are financial advisors and mortgage brokers. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview. One of the biggest problems I think actually with Google Analytics is that there is so much data there that sometimes it puts people off and it's a bit overwhelming. So if if you're one of those people who hasn't been looking at it because you don't know where to start, hopefully what we've done there gives you a few pointers, and at least that gives you 3 or 4 things that you could go in and look at, and have a reasonable chance of understanding what they are now that we've been through them. So I'm just trying to look on the thing and see if we've got any questions that we didn't have. So the only other question come in there. Yeah, so Paul has asked, how do you set the goals? I said, Paul, it is, we've got 2 Pauls. We've got Paul Tate and Paul came on there. So Paul has said, how do you set the goals, David? Yes, I said it will vary from one website to another. And it depends a bit as well on things like, what happens when the goal completes. So one example is if someone's filling in an inquiry form, on some people's websites, once you've filled in an inquiry form, you get sent to a separate thank you page. But on other websites, you fill in the inquiry form and you don't leave that page. It's just that the form gets replaced with a message saying thank you for your inquiry. Now, although that sounds very similar, actually those are 2 very different approaches, and therefore the ways you track the goals in Google Analytics varies depending on which of those kinds of forms you've got. If you've got one that sends you to a separate thank you page, it's actually much easier to track the goal than it is if you've got one where you stay on the same page and a message pops up. But it's a kind of question where really there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer. So yeah, that's kind of where I would need to pick it up with you separately, really. But it's it's something really your web developer should know how to do and should have done when they set it up. But I know that a lot of them don't do it either through through lack of knowledge or not being bothered, one or the other. Okay, so I think if that's it in terms of the questions, the only thing left for me to do is just tell you about the giveaway that I promised there would be. So the giveaway for this week's session is that I will do, for the first 3 people to email me and request this, I will do a quick audit of your Google Analytics, just to make sure that it's correctly set up. In terms of, for example, it's properly linked to your website and that it is actually tracking all your visits. And crucially, I'll check whether your goal tracking is actually set up as it should be. And if I find any problems, then I'll tell you what you or your web developer need to do in order to fix them. So if you think that would be useful for you, and you'd like that quick audit of your analytics, drop me an email with the subject line Analytics Audit. Send that to david@thppcmachine.co.uk, and say the first 3 people to send that in, I will do that quick audit for you. So that brings us to the end of it. I don't see any last minute questions. As I said, if you're watching this on the replay, feel free to chuck questions in as well, because I will come back and answer them. Hope you found that useful, and thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you on the next Facebook Live event in a couple of weeks' time. Details will be posted in the group as usual. Thanks very much. Bye now.